It was a simple act of kindness on a hot summer day. He dropped her off at a modest house on the outskirts of town, her grateful smile the only reward he expected. But the next day, as Carter watched the morning news, his face drained of color, his heart pounding with disbelief. It wasn't unheard of for truck drivers to encounter hitchhikers on the side of the road. Often, truck drivers were the only ones who would actually take them with them. So when Carter saw a girl at the side of the road, not looking older than 12, he knew he couldn't drive past her. The girl stepped into his truck without an ounce of fear on her face. "Good afternoon," she said happily. The girl gave Carter an address that was about an hour's drive in the wrong direction he actually had to go on, but he decided to take her there anyway. As he began to drive again, Carter tried to have a casual conversation. "I'm Carter." "What's your name?" he asked the girl. "I'm Tara." "What is a young girl like you doing all alone at the side of the road?" He watched as Tara's facial expression changed from neutral to a bit sad. "But I won't answer your question. It's a secret," Tara said. He turned his attention back to the road, looking at his navigation for the time. He still had 45 minutes to go with the strange girl in his truck. Sometimes, he would look at her through the corner of his eye, but she just sat there, staring in front of her in silence. Carter didn't know if she was just a little frightened to sit in a stranger's car or if there could be something else going on with the girl. The child had never made him feel this type of way before, which confused Carter even more. What could a little girl like her even do to a grown man? "So are you going to your parents' house?" Carter asked, slicing right through the silence. The little girl seemed to startle a little from his sudden question. "No," she said, "nothing more, nothing less." Then it was back to silence. Carter was done with the one-way conversation, so he turned on the radio and listened to music for the rest of the drive. Finally, they arrive at a house, modest house. It looked ordinary, like he could have lived there. The little girl stepped out of the truck, gave Carter a simple thank you, and slammed the door shut. Carter stayed until he watched the little girl enter the house, but he couldn't see who had opened the door as the person had stayed out of sight. Carter sighed in relief as he started his truck again. Now he had to drive the hour back until he was back en route to his destination. Even though he was now an hour behind schedule, he was happy he was the one who had picked up the girl. He couldn't imagine how wrong this could have gone for her if someone else stopped before he did. He wouldn't make it to his destination for another 12 hours, so he had to find a place to sleep. He knew there was a truck stop in a couple of hours. Around 4 in the morning, Carter woke up to police sirens rushing by. He was sleeping inside his truck at the side of the highway so that he could hear everything outside. After Carter finally dropped off the cargo he was transporting, he made his way home. Totally exhausted, he sat down on the couch. He turned on the TV, hoping one of his favorite shows was on. As he zapped through the channels, he suddenly stopped, almost choking on a bite. On the TV screen was a picture of the little girl he had picked up this afternoon. He couldn't believe it. The news broadcast was at its end, and all he could hear was, "If you know anything, call this number." What had happened to Avery since he last saw her? Why was her face on the news? There was a tightness in his chest, a mix of worry and confusion as he wrote down the last digit of the number. Carter flipped open his laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. He searched for Avery for any news story, any scrap of information that could explain what he'd just seen. But it was like Avery had vanished into thin air. No posts, no news articles, nothing. It was puzzling, maddening. How could a girl on the news just an hour ago leave no trace behind online? Staring at the blank screen, Carter's worry for Avery deepened. With every dead end, his determination grew. Something was off, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Avery needed his help. Carter paced the room, the number burning a hole in his pocket. To call or not, he wanted to help Avery. But what if it dragged him into trouble? After a night of tossing and turning, Carter's resolve solidified with the morning light. He couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in his heart. Picking up the phone, he took a deep breath. It was time to dial the number, time to step into the unknown. But when the call was answered, it wasn't the official tone of an officer that greeted him. It was a voice cold and stern, cutting through Carter's prepared speech before it could even begin. "We know where you are," the voice hissed through the phone, and then total silence. The line went dead. The abrupt end to the call sent a shiver down Carter's spine. It was a threat, plain and simple, and it made his blood run cold. He realized then that he was in deeper waters than he had thought, caught in a current he could not control. The threat on the phone transformed Carter's worry into tangible fear. The idea of being watched, of being tracked because of his brief encounter with Avery, felt like a vise tightening around him. Carter's everyday life turned into a constant look-over-your-shoulder game. Phone rings made him jump, and knocks at the door had him holding his breath. Planning his next move, Carter felt a mix of fear and determination stir inside him. He started piecing together a plan to find Avery, each idea a step towards the light at the end of a very dark tunnel. Carter packed his car with a few essentials, his mind racing with what he might find. He needed answers, and the only way was to go back to where it all started, Avery's house. Pulling up to Avery's house hit Carter with a weird sense of déjà vu. It looked just like it had that day, quiet, ordinary, hiding whatever secrets lay inside. Finally, he knocked. The door creaked open slowly, like a scene from a movie, unveiling not the sight Carter had braced himself for but something entirely unexpected. Carter's surprise turned to shock as he recognized the person standing in the doorway, the news anchor from TV. "Why are you here?" Without a word, the news anchor motioned for Carter to come in. That simple gesture was weirdly comforting but also made Carter's stomach twist a bit more. The news anchor, in casual home clothes, was a stark contrast to his on-air persona. "Didn't expect me to wear a tie at home, did you?" Can as much as I wish it were different, Avery's story isn't just a simple case of running away, the anchor started, his voice faltering. Carter listened, the pieces clicking together. "We've been living in a shadow, hiding from threats you wouldn't believe. It all started with a message," the anchor explained. "A warning that turned our lives upside down." Carter could hardly wrap his head around it. Threats against a child, a father's desperate act to protect her. It was like something out of a nightmare. "I had to make her disappear. I never meant to pull you into this," the anchor said, sincerity lacing his words. "But here we are, and now you're part of this story too." The news report about Avery, the calls, was all orchestrated to throw them off, the anchor explained, his voice steady but his hands betraying a slight tremor. As the night wore on, Carter and the anchor found themselves in deep conversation, sharing bits of their lives far removed from the shadow of danger. The news of the gang's arrest spread through the room like a long-awaited breeze. Carter and the anchor shared a look of profound relief, a silent acknowledgement that their shared nightmare was finally over. "This was quite the journey," Carter said, a hint of a smile breaking through. It was time to step back into his life, but he was changed forever. The anchor stepped forward, extending his hand. "I can't thank you enough, Carter. You've done more than you'll ever know." Goodbyes were said, but the gratitude lingered, a lasting bond formed under the most unlikely circumstances. Driving away, Carter's mind replayed the events, each moment a lesson in courage and compassion. He had stepped into a situation far beyond his expectations, driven by a simple desire to help.